Think back, everyone, to January 1st, 2020. What were we talking about? 2020 is perfect vision, a new decade, new opportunities, a fresh start, optimism of the great year we were about to embark upon. Who could imagine back in January where we would be today and for most of the year? Shutting down schools, non-essential businesses, the medical community bracing for the worst. So today we're fortunate to have 4 amazing women who are leading the way in our community's response, recovery, and rebuilding in the areas of K-12 education, healthcare, business, and philanthropy. With me today, Judy Baseman, Superintendent, Appleton Area School District. Monica Hilt, Hospital President, Ascension Fox Valley and Stevens Point Hospital. Becky Bartoszek, President and CEO, Fox Cities Chamber of Commerce. Tammy Geenen, Vice President of Community Engagement, Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. I know how extremely busy these ladies all are, so we want to thank them for being part of this conversation and this special Women's Fund virtual luncheon. All right, to get the conversation started, we're going to have each woman give us a brief update on what is currently happening in their sector as it relates to the COVID pandemic.
For us in the healthcare setting right now, we really are kind of in a place where we have our one foot in each camp. We've been able to reopen our services and begin to provide care for individuals who have urgent and non-urgent care now that we're through the initial phase of the COVID pandemic hitting our community. But we also have to be very prepared to take on additional patients if we see a surge in our community in the number of COVID positive patients. And so that really is kind of a daily exercise for us, and we're taking a look at the data in terms of the community overall, as well as anticipating what the needs might be for the hospital in terms of caring for COVID positive patients, so that we can plan for how we can best care safely for the other individuals within our community that have other healthcare needs that are also pressing at this time.
From the business sector, I think many businesses are just reinventing themselves and trying to figure out from an HR perspective how they get back to the new normal. So for many workplaces, they're exploring work at home options versus bringing everybody back and trying to navigate the still uncertain waters.
As things were beginning to shut down in March, giving in the community was something that began to ramp up. So we had an opportunity as a community and a community foundation to provide a way for people who wanted to help to be able to channel that charitable giving spirit in a way that could make an immediate difference as the needs were starting to emerge in the community about how to help people that were struggling during the crisis. So that was something that we saw quickly ramp up at the very beginning of the crisis.
I think that's an incredible point, because I know one of the things that we experienced early on was the incredible generosity of our community, both in terms of individuals and businesses and foundations really wanting to jump in and figure out a way that they could help support the healthcare providers and other individuals in need in the community. We are so blessed in this community by the generosity.
And I would agree, for us in K-12 education, really important to capitalize on the partnerships around us in our community, whether it was providing meals to our students during the when schools were closed by governor's order. Last spring, we had to step up very quickly to make sure that kids had what they needed and families had what they needed. And right now, we're all focused on reopening our schools in the fall, and most districts have had to come up with a couple of different plans, because we know that as conditions in our community change, we have to be ready to flow between face-to-face models and virtual models. So to be flexible and responsive to the conditions in the community.
A little bit of a follow-up to that question then is regarding decision making, because it's hard enough in day-to-day basis when things are kind of normal. So let's talk a little bit about how you all made decisions given the uncertainty of the situation, and for the most part, because there were no best options.
It was interesting at the Chamber of Commerce because that was actually one of the easy parts for us. Our entity is 147 years old and we were created for this moment. So it was very clear that we needed to lock arms with all of our partners and save as many businesses as possible and be a calm voice of reason and help the community wade through all of the misinformation that was out there. So it was somewhat easy just because the path was very clear based on the mission of the organization. Now, from the business perspective, that was the bigger challenge in that sector because there was so much information and they were inundated. So hopefully we've gotten to the point where there's less information coming so rapidly, less information overload, and moving into the fall, we're hoping if there's a resurgence that we won't go through that again.
From the healthcare perspective, we do a lot of planning for emergency preparedness, and so we have a pretty formalized structure when situations surface where we put in place incident commands. And so we had an incident command established for the Fox Valley hospitals that I led, and then we had a state incident command as well as a national incident command for Ascension. Now this was all unique because we've not had a situation where we would have to bring up incident commands both at the local, state, and national level, but it really was helpful as a leader to have that breadth of knowledge and expertise to help plan, make decisions about protocols that we were going to follow. And really the thing that was also very helpful is that because of the way the pandemic occurred across the country, we had certain healthcare ministries that experienced their surges in advance of us in Wisconsin. So we were, able to get some learnings from the ministries who had to fight this in advance of us, and that was incredibly helpful for our planning purposes. And then the other thing is that we were able to do some shared resources, because I think one of the things probably you all heard of on the news when this was hitting is there was a lot of angst around having the necessary available equipment, whether it was personal protective equipment or ventilators, because there just was not enough in production. And so we were also able to really move our resources not only around the state but also around the country in a way that we've never had to do it before, but it was incredibly helpful for us.
And in the philanthropic and nonprofit sectors as well, we were together learning as we went. There is no playbook for how to respond in this type of pandemic that any of us have ever experienced. So we were doing a lot of listening and trying to understand from the nonprofit sector, what are you seeing, what are you experiencing, so that from the philanthropic side we could respond appropriately. So similarly, on the national level, we were watching what was happening in those sectors as well, had connections on the national level so that we could bring that knowledge and information into the local conversations that were happening with a strong funders network, both locally, on the statewide level, and those nonprofit partnerships. And when a crisis like this hits, it was such a good reminder about the strength of collaboration and the willingness for the community to come together in times of need. And it really demonstrated itself as the crisis was developing and helping to make decisions and who could step in and play key roles. And as the Community Foundation set up its COVID-19 Community Response Fund and saying, okay, how do we set up a fund to allow people to give when we don't know exactly what all the needs are going to be? How can we make that happen in a very flexible, fluid, efficient way to be able to pivot and change quickly as the needs in the community dictated how to best respond? So we have done a lot of listening, continue to do a lot of listening, and really working with partners, and especially in the creation of that COVID-19 Community Response Fund in partnership with United Way has been very critical in coordination of resources and helping to respond as needed.
As far as decision making, we did have a pandemic plan in place in the Appleton Area School District from probably about 10 years ago when the H1N1 situation occurred. And so it's very clear in our plan that our city health officer, Kurt Egebrecht, would be our point person in terms of helping us work through the decision making depending on the conditions in the community. And he has been a tremendous resource for us, as has our nursing department. And so those decisions that we have had to make in terms of safety guidelines to be ready to reopen, it's been in close collaboration with our health partners. So those partnerships, again, you're hearing that common theme, I think, for all of us.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your leadership at this point. Would you say that it changed or evolved, and if so, how?
Well, I would say for me, I tend to be very collaborative in my leadership style, and so preferred way is to develop different teams that advise on different aspects of the decision making, and found that we need to be a very top-down at times in this organization to really make the changes in a fast-paced way. So I would say, to use that directive aspect of decision making was important. We did build in collaboration, though, as we planned our work groups to reopen, and that did allow me to kind of go back to my preferred way of being, which is to take that input along the way. So
I would say probably not only for myself, but just our leadership team in general, really learning to become much more agile in terms of the way that we analyze data and made decisions and implemented process change. You think about typically major initiatives or changes to an organization, you typically put your team together, you do your planning, you make sure you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and then you want to go forward with a smooth implementation plan on a defined timeline. And with the pandemic, that just wasn't possible. And you're dealing with safety issues regarding your providers and your associates, and you're wanting to care for your patients and keep them safe. And the information was changing on a daily basis. And so we learned that we had to be able to take information in quick and then change major workflows, like sometimes in 24 or 48 hours, and then communicate across the masses, because we have a fairly large provider and associate base. And so a leadership, I think, always knows communication, but it was like that on steroids in terms of being able to move through this in a way that was effective.
I would say a similar lesson here. We learned that you just needed to be flexible at all given times. One of the first things that we did as an organization was put out a survey, and it was 70% of the respondents that we surveyed said that the business did not have enough cash reserves to survive 6 weeks. So we knew we needed to reach out to every partner in the community we could find and provide as many resources as possible. So flexibility, creativity, and personally, I'm not necessarily proud of this, but there was no time to be a control freak. So I very much had to make sure that we trusted even the newest team members, and knock on wood, they all delivered. So it was quite a lesson in leadership in that directive.
And I would say then, banking off Becky's last statement, question is, when you have people who are leading organizations and making these decisions, how did you take care of yourselves, and how did you take care of your team?
I remember being in a meeting with some other funders in the community, and the meeting leader started things off by saying, how have you each been doing self-care as the crisis was unfolding? And I remember thinking, all I've been doing is eating the box of chocolate that my husband gave me on my birthday. And I did not start off doing a very good job with self-care, and my tendency is to want to think of the team first, and how are others doing, how are they feeling, take care of them first, and how is our community doing, and realized as the crisis went on the need to remember to take care of myself as well. So in order for me to be able to take care of my team, really focused on things like getting out in nature and taking bike rides and going for walks, and that became easier as the weather improved here locally, but really became very aware of the need to be intentional about taking that time. And then with the challenges of suddenly working remotely with our whole foundation team, how do you still stay connected? And scheduling more time to be connected virtually not only helped everyone kind of track on their workloads and help us determine where we could pitch in and help each other, but it also was a time and a way for people to just share how they were feeling personally and emotionally. And sometimes those check-in meetings were just sharing time and very little focused on workload, but that's what everyone needed. And I have used the phrase, people have been on the COVID coaster for a long time, and everyone is going through the ups and downs of the ride at different times over the last several months. And so as a leader and a member of a team that's leading not only the organization but an individual team, how can we all help each other continue on that ride?
Yeah, I think being purposeful about checking in regarding how people are doing, just to not have it be about some task or responsibility, but just really making a point to check in and how are you doing, Personally, just really have stayed, I've invested in a personal trainer, and she keeps me on yoga and other fitness things, and so that has helped to have her encouragement, and we check in once a week, so it's helped.
For us, it's been similar things as well. I think in the beginning, when all of this kicked off in early March, most of the team were, it was kind of like a 7-day-a-week, all hours of the day kind of situation. And so I think in the beginning it was really about kind of the support that we would provide each other and making sure that people could get some time away, even if it was only for, a half a day or, disconnect for 8 hours on a Saturday. And so I think that was how we started in the beginning. But then, a lot, as you guys talked about, making sure that that we took time out and encourage people to take time out for themselves, spend time with family, do some self-care. We did a lot in terms of resources. If people needed some spiritual care or just basic things like dependent care support for their family members or children because of some of the disruption in other services in the community.
It was interesting for our organization because I do believe that the first month we were all on an adrenaline high. It was just, the mission is so important. This is impacting the entire world. How can we make a difference? And after about a month, I saw everybody starting to crash because everyone was just exhausted. So we learned very quickly that we had to slow down. And the head of our HR department said, "You remember on the airplane when that bag comes down, you have to take care of yourself first." So after that first 30 days, we did make a very conscious effort to slow things down and make sure that everybody was receiving the things that they needed. We even had team members that had side businesses that unfortunately had massive fires and things like that. And had we not taken the time to really reach out to that person who was working remotely, we may not have even known all of the struggles that they were running up against. So it became more and more important that we stayed connected.
Often creativity and leadership are not talked about together. So now we are going to do that. What is one of the most creative out-of-the-box ideas that you implemented during this crisis?
Well, for our organization, one of the largest events, or one of the most important programs that we do for the community each year is Oktoberfest. And a lot of people don't realize that Oktoberfest is actually the largest fundraiser for hundreds of nonprofits in our region. So when we got to about the May time period, it was pretty clear that we were not going to be able to bring together 220,000 people on College Avenue this fall. So we knew that that was no longer an option, but we also knew that there was hundreds of nonprofits that were relying upon that support. Oktoberfest has absolutely a fantastic committee that has run this program for 30 years. And they put their heads together and came up with a program that's called Oktoberfest Reimagined. And basically it's a template where it gives a format where a nonprofit can partner with a business. And the goal is, starting the traditional day of Oktoberfest, that nonprofit will drive business to that organization, whether it's delivering menus or orders or selling snowblowers or whatever it ends up to be. And at the end of October, then that business will share their profits with that nonprofit. So it's benefiting the business as well as the nonprofit organization. So I have nothing but huge kudos for the Oktoberfest committee thinking out of the box to deliver.
I think similarly, my team members have been very creative about reimagining some of the traditional pieces that unfortunately our seniors did not get to experience in the usual way. And so our 3 high school graduation ceremonies they were done virtually, but really honored the graduates in a whole new way. And I was just so pleased and proud of the way that we were able to make that a special time, regardless of the need to be virtual. So.
I can't, as I was thinking back as we were talking a little bit about the creativity, and I'm not coming up with anything. I felt like we were more practical in terms of how we approach things. But if I took a step back, I would say, when we did our surge planning, and I'm sure that this is applicable to all of the healthcare organizations, going through the process of figuring out how to double the number of patients that you typically can accommodate within your organization within a couple week period of time, figuring out how you would staff twice as many patients with the existing resources that you have in terms of retraining and moving people around. It doesn't sound like really glitzy, but there was a lot of creativity employed in figuring out how to make that happen in such a short period of time in a way that was safe and practical.
All right. I don't know about you guys. I am not sleeping as well as I once did, but the question now is, what kept you up at night, or, let's be real, still keeps you from sleeping at night?
To me, what kept me up at night was worrying about people that had worked their entire lives that were very likely going to lose their businesses if they weren't educated about the information that they needed to keep their businesses viable. But what keeps me up at night now is I am genuinely concerned, as well as I'm sure the rest of the ladies up here are as well, with the mental health impact that this is having on our community. We talk to people all day, every day, and you can see the strain. The not knowing when there's going to be an end, not knowing when there's going to be a vaccine, and knowing that a lot of people are either in the camp of very fearful or angry and frustrated. So that's what keeps me up at night.
Well said. I completely agree.
We too are hearing that need from nonprofit organizations that are working on the ground, that topic of mental health is something that will need to be addressed in a prioritized way in the community, not only short term, but for long term, and everyone across the community. So doesn't matter. It's this is a crisis that has affected everyone in some way. So that need is going to be great as we continue.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's the safety of our kids and our staff, and trying to make decisions that are the best in terms of that safety piece, but also knowing how much we need our kids to be back in our classrooms. That's where they do the best. That's where we do the best work. And it's tough to make that call, but you keep trying to do your best, understanding there are needs that we need to meet in a new way. So our health partners, mental health therapists and so on, have figured out a way to provide that on-site therapy and support for our kids virtually. Everybody has stepped up because we know that that's a huge piece. When kids are away from us, we don't have that ability to monitor how they're doing. And so knowing that I have partners who will step forward and help in that area makes it a little bit easier to make the hard call for the just the plain safety with the pandemic conditions. So still keeping up at night though.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about a positive now. What's been a positive for your sector as the result of the pandemic, and how do you envision the new normal?
I think for us, it has fast forward our staff and us as an organization to do more with technology, just in terms of engaging kids. It's really pushed us forward in terms of our long-range technology integration plan. We have now been fast forwarded into being able to do that at a much higher level, and our staff have really stepped forward to learn the best practices related to virtual learning. So that has moved us forward and will continue to move us forward. It's been kind of a shocking way to go about it, but out of necessity comes growth. So
I would agree, not only for our team getting thrust into that new technology world, as we were creating the COVID-19 Community Response Fund with United Way and trying to then determine, okay, how do we collaborate virtually? But also from a process perspective, how can we quickly and rapidly deploy dollars out into the community? So it's really been a silver lining, a COVID silver lining, which has helped us to reimagine how can we work more efficiently. And as a result, in a 4-month period, we're able to fundraise to have $1.5 million come into the COVID-19 Community Response Fund, and then have grants of $1 million go out during that same 4-month time period, which is really incredible work that has been done by a lot of partners, both on the dollars coming in and the dollars coming out. So definitely a positive, and as we've said, there are certain things we've been able to implement that I don't know that we'll go back to some of the old ways of doing things. So yeah, it's jumping in with both feet, and it's trial and error as you go, and then pick the pieces that you say, yep, we want to continue this way going forward.
For us, we've had similar experiences with the use of technology. Certainly for some of our associates who are not direct patient caregivers, we're using virtual technology in a much different way that I think will continue well into the future. I think we're trying to capture that agile movement in our organization, or in terms of planning forward. And so when we had to do it in response to the pandemic, we're trying to continue to be able to move quickly and make changes that will help serve patients and care for patients better. So we're trying to hold on to that in other situations. And then finally, just virtual care for people in our community. We've had a virtual care platform in healthcare for a while, but there had been some regulatory constraints around that, and with the pandemic, I think we saw a relook at that from some of the governmental groups, and so we were able to offer much broader array of services in a virtual fashion. And there's a segment of our population that really appreciate and prefer to receive care in that way for certain conditions. There are others that do not, but I think it's a great new resource that will continue on into the future based on individual preference.
I think that Judy's terms of fast forward are spot on for the business sector. I think that the business sector in general was adopting the new technology, whether it was Zoom meetings or new platforms where people were able to work remotely, and it just fast forwarded the entire business sector in that direction.
Okay, personal confession time. I'm a hugger. I grew up in a hugging family. That is probably the thing I miss the most about pre-COVID. So I'll ask the same of you ladies. What do you miss the most?
For me, it's travel. My family and I, we love to travel during our time away, and I'm hopeful that in the not too distant future we'll be able to start doing a little bit more of that again.
I would say the informal interactions that you have when you have in-person meetings, whether it's arriving early and just having that casual conversation. And so those Zoom meetings are good in some ways, but you miss that informal sort of between time talking and not worrying about distancing things.
Judy, I'm right there with you. In the Chamber of Commerce, our role is to bring the community together, and to do it on a screen is not my favorite approach.
Yeah, I've been thinking about why at the end of Zoom calls people wave at the end, and like I think the wave is the hug, and that little piece to say, yeah, I hope you're doing okay. We'll see you, and so that's been at least a little signal to maybe just add a little extra something at the end of those Zoom calls. But personally, also just miss, in addition to everything that you've all said, just being able to be together in community with other people, whether it's at a music performance or a theater performance, whatever that is, and just missing that togetherness, energy, and just spirit of community. And it's hard driving down the street and you're on a weekend and you don't see the people out on the street as much, or as much traffic. And I'm finding a parking spot way too easy on some of these weekends, and it's just a reminder of that change. But I'm hopeful that some of the COVID silver lining types of things will continue, and will help everyone bounce back quickly and be stronger in the future.
Well, speaking of silver linings, we talk a lot about Zoom and all the new technology. I had a naked child behind mine one time. I've had dogs barking in my Zoom calls. I've had to restart several times. So we'll ask, what is one of your funniest Zoom moments?
Well, you want to talk about true confessions. Monica, you're going to hear this story for the first time. At the Chamber, we had a webinar where we brought in leadership from both hospital networks as well as the health department, and we had hundreds of people watching the webinar. And all of the people behind the scenes were running the event from their homes. And the main person who had control of the entire event, her computer went crazy. She could not see the speakers, she could not see the questions, she couldn't see anything that was going on. So she was texting us and she could not give control to anyone else. So all of us were panicking independently at our homes, but the pros that were on the actual event and the webinar, they would ask a question and say, "So, Tanya, should I answer that question?" And when she didn't respond, they immediately picked up and ran the entire webinar by themselves. So it was a panic moment, but at the end, we all still laugh about that just being the most awkward moment of COVID for our organization. So thank you, Monica, for setting us a great person for that event.
For me, I was, as I think back, I don't have like a really good story of there was this one call and this happened either to me or someone else. But I will tell you that whenever I get on certain Zoom calls, I'm always in the back of my mind thinking, what do they have on below the waist? Because I have done a few meetings in a fancy silk top and athletic shorts and bedroom slippers. And so I'm always curious what's going on below the waist in terms of is it casual attire or business attire? So
this is the first time I've worn a full professional outfit and shoes with heels since March. So yeah, I'm with you. And I forgot how long it takes me to get ready when I actually have to put on real clothes and makeup and things. So
it's been kind of fun because our some of our principals are not under contract in the month of July, and obviously this summer we all came together on Zoom calls throughout the summer. And one of our administrators, female leader, has a young daughter, age 1, and so she came on the Zoom call early, and so there was just this cute little 1-year-old with her hair up and a little pigtail on top of her head, and she had a brewer's outfit on. And it's been, when you're away from kids and just to have that connection, and she was on early, and I had a chance to talked to her, and she responded to the lady on the screen, and just fun to see, you know, your people in their home settings, and you get a sense for their family, and you know, a point of pride with this young mom and her little one. It was warmed my heart.
All right, well, I want to thank all four of you so much for spending time with us today. I think if one thing is clear, we have a lot of superior leaders here in our area, and so we thank them for their leadership, we thank them for their optimism for the future, and I think if there's one thing we have all learned, it's that we can all use a little bit of grace as we move through the pandemic.